In this video, I'm going to show you the process that I used to make my very first pair of wing dividers. Hi, I'm Dennis Frechette, and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be reposting the video that I made a few years ago on making wing dividers. It was the first pair that I ever made. It was a two-part video, so I've done a little bit of editing on it, combined it into one video to make it a little bit easier to watch. So that's what I have for you today, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to be forging each leg of the dividers out of a piece of 5/8 square bar. The first step in a project like this is to isolate all of the areas that you need to forge out. So here I'm laying out the dimensions that I need for the hinge section as well as the raised area on each leg that's going to be used to attach the curved section of the dividers. And I always use dividers for this. I preset them to the dimension that I need, and then that allows me to work with the hot metal and measure very accurately, very quickly. In this case, I'm going to be forging the area between two of these fullers to 3/8 of an inch thickness. So I'm just using a 3/8 bar to gauge that. That way I don't have to reset my dividers. The other leg of the dividers gets forged out exactly the same way except for the hinge area. The leg that I just finished has the two outer layers of the hinge. Now I need to forge the single inner layer of that hinge. So I only need one section. So the bar that I'm going to start with is going to be 3/8 by 5/8. So I need to forge that down and then I can cross peen it out to its full width. And from this area, everything else on the leg needs to match the first leg exactly. Here I'm back working on the hinge section on the first leg that I forged out. I need to split this down the middle to be able to fit it around the other leg of the divider. So here you can see how I created a series of drill holes, and that is going to remove most of the material. So with all of that resistance gone, I'm going to be able to split this hot very easily, and the drill holes are just going to guide the slot punch down the center of the hole. Here I'm just using a sharp chisel to clean up the top edges on both sides of the opening. I don't need to create a perfectly flat surface all the way down. That'll get forged out later. I just need to clean up this scalloped edge around the outside edges so when I forge everything together, it'll be a straight line. In hindsight, I should have used a wider slot punch to drive all of these edges towards the center of the opening and then switch to my thinner slot punch to actually create the opening. That would have cleaned up the top edges and pushed all the garbage into the center where it was a lot easier to deal with. Now that the opening's been roughed out, I'm going to start working on the other side. I've traced out the location of the bevel, and I'm going to use some combination of chisels, files, and grinders to bring this section down to its final dimensions. Whenever I need to remove a lot of material like this, I find a round nose chisel works the best. Sometimes they're called oil groove chisels, whatever you call them. The shape just digs out a really good sized chip, and they seem to stay sharper longer than a regular flat ground chisel. So I start removing most of the material with a chisel, and then I follow up with a really coarse half-round rasp. Again, removes a lot of material. The half-round shape allows you to put a lot of pressure on a very small area, so it really cleans up a lot of material in a hurry. Once I'm safely away from that edge, I will use a regular angle grinder to get rid of most of the materials, and then I'll come back and finish up with a file or a rasp. Here I'm getting ready to forge the two pieces together. The part that I just finished on the right that has the single blade, that is going to be used as the mandrel to forge the other side of the hinge blank. There's not really any way of getting inside that opening to clean it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the part that I just finished. It's filed to shape. I'm going to leave that cold. That's going to be a mandrel, and I'm going to hammer the other side down to that mandrel. It'll take a few heats to get it all fitted together, but when I'm done, I'll have two pieces that are perfectly fit together, and all of the edges should line up. From here, I'm going to be finishing up the forging on the legs by adding a hardened steel tip to the inside face of each leg. And this will allow me to use the dividers to scribe layout lines directly into a metal surface. So I've set up the weld, and you can see how the bar that I was welding to the legs shifted a little bit in the fire, but this isn't a problem. If you've properly heated up the steel and the flux is still active, you will have a little bit of time to realign everything and hammer it enough to just tack the weld. You won't be able to do any heavy hammering on this. At this point, you just want to stick the thing back together, reapply some more flux, put it back in the fire, and bring it back to the anvil and do a proper job of welding the two pieces together. Here I'm a little further along. All the forging is done on the legs, and I'm getting ready to pin the two legs together. So what I've done is I've drilled a hole in the location of the pivot pin, and I drilled it a little bit undersized for the pin that I'm using, and I'm going to use the pin itself as a drift to size the hole. All I've done is I've ground a slight taper to the end of the bar, and I've driven it in. And while the hinge area is still hot, I'm just going to correct any distortion or irregularities that might have happened while I was drifting that hole. The legs of the dividers are riveted together, but on better quality dividers, the rivet head is actually pressing down on a heavy washer, not the sides of the divider. So that's what I have here. I have these round bars that are just slightly smaller than I need, so I'm going to hammer them flat to the full dimension of the dividers so they apply a very even pressure to the face. And then at that point, I'll be able to drill out the inside, fit them to the bar that I'm using for the rivet, and rivet the whole unit together. So at this point, I'm ready to start riveting. You can also see how I've cut away the top edge of the one leg of the dividers that had the two plates. I needed that link connecting the two plates together while I was shaping it, but I don't need that anymore. So I've cut it all back, and you can see now the three individual plates and how they're going to swing past each other. When all the riveting is done, you will need to reheat the ends of the dividers to free up the legs and make sure that they operate smoothly. Here I have a drawing that lays out the exact shape of the curved arm that I need to add to these dividers. So the next thing that I have to do is to forge a curved bar that fits exactly inside of this drawing. I'm going to start by bending a piece of round bar while it's cold just to get the rough shape, and then I'm going to forge it flat. If all goes well, I should only have to do some pretty minor adjustments to get it to conform to the drawing. This curved arm needs to pass through both legs. So here I have the location of the hole marked on both of the legs. I'll be removing the bulk of the material with a drill, using a chisel to remove anything else that I can get at, and then I'll be doing the fine tuning with a file. Now that I can insert the curved arm into the divider legs, I have to make sure that the arc is in exactly the right location. So I'm going to use a smaller set of dividers to sweep along the arc and make sure that the center line of that arc is exactly where it should be. If the dividers drift off of the arc in one direction or another, then I'll make fine adjustments until I can get the dividers to follow the center line through the entire arc. When that's been established, I'm going to use a Sharpie and right on the curved arm where it belongs in the dividers. Next, I'm going to clamp a pair of locking pliers right on that line to keep the curved arm in that position. And I'll start opening and closing the divider legs and carefully filing away any material that causes the legs to hang up at any point until I can get a smooth travel through the whole arc. The end of the curved arm that gets locked into one of the divider legs usually had a very large decorative nail head hammered into the end of the bar, and that's what I'm working on now. I've replaced the marker line on the surface with a couple of deep center punch marks that I can find while the metal is hot. And I'm lining up those center punch marks with the top edge of the jaws, and I'm upsetting all the material back to form that nail head. Once I have enough material backed up, I'm going to actually use the divider legs to support the end of the bar so I can forge a decorative nail head on the end of it. And the final step is to clean up that nail head with a file. Once all that's done, the curved arm is ready to be pinned in place with a flush rivet. The thumb screw is made from a piece of flat bar. The thickness of the flat bar is equal to the diameter of the pin that you're going to be using. So you start off by cutting a perfectly square pin into the plate, making sure that the width of the pin is exactly the same as the thickness of the plate. And then from there, you knock off the corners, making an octagon, and you check those corners to make sure that they are exactly the same as the thickness of the plate. And from there, you can just file a very crude circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. The die that you're going to be using to cut the thread will take care of the rest. Once the thread is cut, you can go ahead and shape the rest of the screw head. I always leave a small piece like this attached to the bar for as long as possible. The bar is really easy to clamp in the vise, and you really just need a small attachment point to hang on to the actual screw. So you can do all the shaping, get everything right, and at the very end, you just saw it off from the bar, and the only thing you need to clean up is that little tiny contact area, which is very simple to do. The last thing that I need to do is to run these through the forge to reestablish the forge scale finish that I want and to heat treat the actual tips of the dividers. After I've quenched the tips, I draw the temper to a dark straw heading over to a reddy purpley color, which is right around 440 degrees Fahrenheit. That gives pretty hard tips. They're not brittle and they'll take a fair amount of abuse. So here are the completed dividers along with the smaller dividers that I used as a pattern.